Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. Instead of just talking about history, we're going to step inside it. I want you to imagine you are a concubine in China's Forbidden City. You live in a beautiful, gilded prison, surrounded by silk and jade. But your entire world, your very life, depends on the favor of one man, the Emperor. And tonight, that man has just died. This isn't just a story, it's a survival guide, though frankly, your odds aren't great. You might not even make it through this first chapter. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really does help the channel find other people who appreciate these quiet, late-night journeys. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where our little community gathers from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are in your chambers in the Eastern palaces, tracing the delicate silk embroidery of a screen with a perfectly manicured nail. The air, usually thick with the rich scents of sandalwood and plum blossoms, is now thin and sharp. The first thing that alerts you is the silence. The Forbidden City is never truly quiet. It hums with the soft footsteps of thousands of eunuchs, the distant whispers of servants, the rustle of silk. But this silence is different. It is a heavy, suffocating silence, as if the entire imperial city, with its 9,999.5 rooms, is holding its breath. And then you hear it, a single toll from the bell on the Meridian Gate Tower, deep and resonant. It's a sound you've never heard before, but you instinctively know what it means. It is not the bell that announces the Emperor's journey to the Temple of Heaven, nor the one for his visit to the ancestral temple. This one is slower, heavier. The bell strikes once, and the sound hangs in the air, vibrating through the lacquered wood of your furniture and into your very bones. It is the sound of an ending. The Son of Heaven is dead. Your world, already a cage, now shrinks to the size of this room. You look out through the carved window lattice across the vast, empty expanse of the outer court. You've always found the lack of trees there unsettling. The official explanation is that nothing should stand taller than the Hall of Supreme Harmony, lest it obscure the Emperor's majesty. But tonight, it looks like a metaphor for your life. A beautiful man-made expanse with no sign of natural wildlife. A place where everything is managed, controlled, and now terrifyingly unknown. The Emperor's death is not a single event. It is the beginning of a process, a dangerous and opaque transfer of power. The exact moment he drew his last breath is a state secret, a piece of intelligence more valuable than any jewel in the treasury. Historians would later debate the precise timelines of these imperial deaths for centuries. Has he been gone for hours, or even days? Is this toll of the bell a natural conclusion, or a final move in a political chess game, delayed until the key players, the Empress, the most powerful eunuchs, the designated heir, have secured their positions? A cold certainty prickles your skin. Your fate, and the fate of thousands of women like you, was likely decided long before this bell ever rang. Your personal maids, usually a flurry of quiet efficiency, are frozen, their faces pale and blank. They look at you, their eyes filled with questions they dare not ask. What happens now? You are their mistress, a concubine of rank. But in this moment, you are all the same. You are property, and your owner is dead. The bell tolls again, and this time the silence that follows is more terrifying than the sound itself. It is a silence filled with whispers you cannot yet hear, with plans being made in halls you will never enter, and with the chilling realization that the intricate rules that governed your life are now void. A new set of rules is about to be written, and you have no say in them whatsoever. The silence after the bells is not empty. It is a vacuum, and power, like nature, abhors a vacuum. In the vermilion-walled corridors of the inner court, a new reality is taking shape, communicated not by edict, but by whispers, by the sway of a lantern, by the suddenly firm stride of a eunuch who was insignificant yesterday. You, isolated in your own palace, must learn to read these new signals, for your life depends on it. Your world is now governed by three invisible forces. The first, and most formidable, is the Empress Dowager. She may be the late emperor's mother, or she may be his principal wife, elevated by his death. She is the ultimate matriarch, the one woman who can command the respect, or at least the obedience, of the entire court. You have perhaps seen her only a handful of times, a distant figure in a brilliant yellow phoenix robe, her face a mask of serene authority. But her influence is everywhere. Her approval could mean a peaceful old age. Her displeasure, a fate you dare not contemplate. Her word can legitimize the new emperor or condemn a rival faction to oblivion. The second force is closer, and in many ways more terrifying. The eunuchs. They are the lifeblood of the Forbidden City, the silent, omnipresent network that connects every corner of this vast complex. You have always treated them as servants, men who pour tea, move furniture, act as guards and attendants. But now, you see them for what they are, the gatekeepers of power. They control the flow of everything, food, supplies, and most importantly, information. They were the ones who attended the emperor on his deathbed, who heard his last words, who know the secrets of his will. They will be the ones to now interpret and execute the orders of the new regime. It is a mainstream historical point that eunuchs wielded immense, even decisive political power, especially during the Ming dynasty. They formed a shadow bureaucracy, a secret service, and a palace guard whose influence often outweighed that of the ministers in the outer court, because they had direct access to the emperor. Now, with the emperor gone, their loyalty is the most valuable commodity in the city. A eunuch who favors you might slip you an extra brazier of coals on a cold night, or a scrap of news. A eunuch who holds a grudge might forget your meal, or worse, whisper a word against you in the ear of a powerful new master. You watch them as they move through your courtyard, their faces impassive. You try to read a change in their posture, a flicker in their eyes. Does the chief eunuch who serves the Empress Dowager walk with more authority today? Does the young eunuch who serves your bitter rival, noble consort Li, now avoid your gaze as he passes? These subtle shifts tell you who is rising and who is falling. And here you encounter a truly mind-boggling piece of trivia, the sheer scale of their numbers. It is estimated that by the late Ming dynasty, as many as 70,000 eunuchs were employed by the court. Some historians even place the number closer to 100,000. It was a city within a city, a population of castrated men dedicated to the service of the imperial family. The logistics of managing, feeding, and controlling such a vast and politically potent group are staggering. They were not just a few guards. They were an institution, a force of nature in their own right. The third force, the most important and the most mysterious, is the new emperor. Is it the son of the principal empress? The boy you've seen being tutored by stern-faced Confucian scholars? Is it the son of a favored concubine, a spoiled child who might resent all of his father's other women? Or, and your heart lurches at the thought, could it be your son? The child you were forced to give up to be raised by the empress, as palace protocol demanded? You do not know. Until the official announcement, you are all suspended in limbo. This uncertainty fuels a central academic debate about the nature of eunuch power. Were they, as historian Ray Huang argued, merely an instrument? The emperor's personal arm to enforce his will against a stubborn and conservative scholar official bureaucracy? Or were they, as traditional Confucian historians long maintained, a corrupting influence, a third sex, whose ambition and greed led time and again to the downfall of dynasties? From your perspective, sitting in this silent room, you suspect the truth is messier. They were both. They were men who had sacrificed their manhood for proximity to power. They were loyal to the throne, but they were also survivors. And in the days to come, their instinct for survival will shape everyone's fate, including yours. The days of waiting are a unique form of torture. Your routine continues, but it is a hollow pantomime of your former life. The same exquisite meals are delivered, but you cannot taste them. The same beautiful silks are laid out, but you cannot feel their softness. Every moment is stretched taut with anxiety. Then, one morning, the summons comes. An old eunuch, his face as smooth and expressionless as a river stone, appears at your door. He does not say your name. He simply says, "It is time." You are led with hundreds of other women to a great hall in the inner court. You walk in silent, rustling lines. A river of color and perfume, your heads bowed. You are arranged in the strict hierarchy that has defined your entire existence. The highest-ranking consorts in the front, the mid-level concubines like yourself in the middle, and the countless, nameless palace ladies who may have only seen the emperor once at the very back. It is the first time you have seen the full, staggering scale of the emperor's collection. Women of all ages, of all types, from the daughters of high officials to girls chosen from remote villages. Each one a potential mother to the throne, and now, each one a liability. The hall is dominated by the presence of the regents. The new Empress Dowager sits on a raised dais, her face obscured by shadow. Beside her are the most powerful eunuchs and the highest-ranking imperial princes. The new emperor, a small boy, sits on a dragon throne that is too big for him. A tiny, stiff doll with a look of mingled fear and confusion. He is a spectator at his own coronation of power. A grand secretary, a man with a long, wispy beard and a robe embroidered with gold thread, unrolls a scroll of imperial yellow silk. This is it, the edict, the final will and testament of the late emperor. His words, which he can no longer speak, will now reach out from the grave to command the living. The hall is silent. You can hear the frantic beating of your own heart. The reading begins. The Grand Secretary's voice is a monotone, listing the emperor's great accomplishments, his divine connection to heaven, the sorrow of his passing. It is all formulaic, a script repeated for centuries. But you are not listening to the preamble. You are waiting for the part that matters. The part concerning the disposition of the inner court. This moment encapsulates a mainstream historical truth. A concubine's fate depended entirely on the will of the deceased emperor, the whims of the new one, and the needs of the state. There was no single, standard procedure. Every succession was a unique event, with a unique set of outcomes. The edict could be merciful, or it could be brutal. It all depended on the character of the man who once ruled you, and the political calculations of the men who ruled you now. The Grand Secretary's voice shifts slightly. He has reached the critical section. He announces that the Empress, now the Empress Dowager, will be honored and will guide the new emperor. This is expected. He lists the highest-ranking consorts, the mothers of the emperor's other sons, the various princes. They will be granted the title of Tai Fei, Consort Dowager, and will be treated with all the dignity and care befitting their station. A collective silent sigh of relief ripples through the front ranks. Then comes the fate of the others. The women like you, who were once favored but failed to produce a son, or the women who never really caught the emperor's eye more than once or twice. Here the path of fate diverges into a terrifying lottery. The edict declares that some will be permitted to live out their days in a designated, secluded section of the palace, a quiet and respectable form of house arrest. Others, of lower rank, will be sent to the imperial mausoleum to serve as tomb guardians, a lonely life of vigil. Still others will be dispatched to royal monasteries, to live out their years in prayer and austerity. And then, the Grand Secretary pauses. The air in the hall grows colder. He speaks of the emperor's great virtue and the loyalty he inspired. He speaks of those who, in their profound grief and devotion, wish to continue serving their master in the next world. And here, a chilling and little-known historical practice comes to the surface. The edict does not explicitly command death. It speaks of honor, of devotion, of following the former emperor to the underworld. It announces that a special, honorable feast will be held for those concubines granted this supreme privilege. The euphemism is a thin veil over a brutal reality. The revival of human sacrifice, a practice known as chunzang. Though it had been largely abandoned for centuries, the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, Hongwu, had revived it. His son, the Yongli emperor, and his grandson, the Hongxi emperor, continued the tradition with brutal enthusiasm. A list of names begins to be read. A high-ranking consort in the front row, known for her musical talent, collapses in a faint. No one moves to help her. Two eunuchs simply and silently carry her away. Another name is read, and another. These are the Keotian-nu, Zhaotian-nu, the heaven-facing women. This brings up a fierce academic debate. Was there any element of choice in this honor? The official records, written by the very court that ordered the practice, often portray it as a voluntary, supreme act of loyalty. Some scholars, trying to understand the mindset of the time, suggest that within the intense psychological framework of the palace, where a woman's entire existence was consumed by the emperor, they may have genuinely seen this as their final, most meaningful duty. But most modern historians are deeply skeptical, viewing it as a command performance in almost all cases. The choice was between a dignified suicide and being assisted by the palace eunuchs, social pressure, The hopelessness of the future and the implicit threat of force made it an offer you couldn't refuse. Your palms are sweating. You clench your hands in your sleeves, praying not to any god, but just to the vast, indifferent silence of the hall. You pray that your name is not on the list. Just then, the eunuch standing beside your row takes a small, deliberate step forward. He is looking directly at you. Your name is called. The world shrinks to a single point of sound. The Grand Secretary's monotone, the rustle of silk, the stifled sob of the woman next to you, it all fades away. There is only your name hanging in the cold air of the great hall. You, who are to be honored with an invitation to the final feast. You don't remember being led from the hall. Your legs are moving, but you can't feel them. You are guided by firm, emotionless hands, the hands of eunuchs, back to your palace. But it is not your familiar home. You are taken to a different courtyard, one you have never seen before. It has a stark beauty and an unnerving quiet. Here, you are joined by the other chosen women. During the Yongle Emperor's time, there were 16 such women, and for his father, the Hongwu Emperor, there were 40. The numbers vary, but the fate is the same. You recognize some of them. There is Lady Kuai, who had been visiting her family when the emperor fell ill and has just returned to this nightmare. There is a young girl, only 16, who has been in the palace for just 6 months. Her face is a mask of disbelief. You look at each other, but no one speaks. What is there to say? You are already ghosts. Servants, or are they guards, bring you new robes of pure white silk. They help you bathe and perfume your skin one last time. It is all done with a chilling, ritualistic reverence. This is the heart of the practice of Shunzang, a custom that had horrified philosophers like Mozi and Xunzi 1,000 years before, yet was revived with cold precision by the early Ming emperors. The mainstream historical view is that the practice was enacted to provide the emperor with servants, companions, and pleasure in the afterlife, ensuring his comfort and status in the spirit world, just as he had in the mortal one. You are not just dying, you are being transferred to a new, eternal post. The honorable feast is held in an exquisite small hall. The tables are laden with the finest delicacies, dishes you have only seen at the New Year's celebration last year. Jade cups are filled with fine wine. The air is thick with incense. It is a grotesque pantomime of a celebration. An old eunuch addresses you all, his voice soft, almost kind. He praises your loyalty, your devotion. He speaks of the eternal glory you are about to receive. He tells you this is not an end, but a transition, a promotion. This feast is one of the most bizarre and lesser-known details of the sacrificial process. It was not just a cold execution. It was framed as a final, celebratory rite of passage. Historical sources describe this last meal as an honorable event, a final gift from the state before it demanded the ultimate service. It was a psychological tool, designed to lend a veneer of civilization and honor to an act of supreme brutality, perhaps to soothe the consciences of those who ordered it, and to pacify the victims in their final moments. You sit at the table, a cup of wine in your trembling hand. Do you drink it? Is it poisoned? That would be a mercy, a quick, quiet end. You look at the other women. Some are weeping silently into their sleeves. Others stare blankly at the walls, their minds already far away. One consort, known for her sharp tongue, lets out a short, hysterical laugh. A eunuch is at her side instantly, his hand on her shoulder, and the laugh dies in her throat. The feast ends. The plates are cleared. Now the final act begins. You are led into an antechamber. In the center of the room stand rows of heavy wooden beds or platforms. From the beams above, white silk cords hang down, tied in neat, elegant knots. This is the method. It is clean, quiet, and leaves no unseemly marks. It preserves the body intact for the tomb. The eunuchs guide each of you to your station. They help you onto the wooden bed. Their movements are gentle, efficient. They place the cool, smooth silk around your neck. No one struggles. To struggle is to lose the last shred of dignity you have left. In this moment, the academic debate over coercion versus volition becomes brutally real. While some historical accounts, particularly from the Yuan dynasty before the Ming, mention widows and servants voluntarily committing death for their dead husbands or masters, the Ming imperial practice was clearly more systematic and compulsory. The highly orchestrated, state-sponsored ritual, from selection to feasting to organized execution, belies any notion of genuine choice. Historians argue that the ceremony was a naked display of imperial power, a statement that the emperor's ownership of his household, particularly its women, was absolute and extended even beyond the grave. Your life was a gift from him, and now, in his death, that gift is being reclaimed. You stand on the wooden bed, the silk cold against your skin. You close your eyes. You think of your family, of your mother's face, which is already a blur. You think of the day you entered the palace, a girl of 14 filled with fear and a tiny secret flicker of hope. You see the faces of the other women, a gallery of silent, shared despair. The old eunuch gives a quiet, almost imperceptible nod. With a sudden, jarring scrape, the wooden bed is pulled out from under your feet. The moment of falling is not what you imagined. It is not a plunge into a dark abyss, but a strange, suspended silence. In this final, elongated second, you see everything with a terrible clarity. This is the rite of the Chaosian Nu, a poetic, respectful name designed to obscure the cold, brutal reality of your end. You are not alone in this fate. The practice of human sacrifice, Rengsun, is ancient, stretching back over 2,000 years to the Shang dynasty. Archaeological excavations at Yinshu, the Shang capital, have uncovered thousands of skeletons in sacrificial pits. Servants, soldiers, and family members buried with their kings to serve them in the next life. It is an accepted historical fact that human sacrifice was a significant part of early Chinese state and religious ritual, a way for rulers to display power and ensure their comfort in the afterlife. But its revival in the civilized Ming dynasty was a shocking regression, a deliberate return to an ancient and barbaric assertion of power. As you hang in the silent hall, you are part of a grim tableau. In some cases, for some emperors, the method was different. Some of your doomed sisters were not granted the honor of the silk cord. They were simply handed a cup of poison. Others were taken directly to the burial site, dispatched quickly by the grave digger's blades, and their bodies placed in the satellite tombs that ringed the emperor's grand mausoleum. And then there was the most disturbing and bizarre method of sacrifice, being buried alive in a standing position. This was not common, but it is recorded. The idea was that you would be standing at attention, ready to greet and serve the emperor the moment he arrived in the spirit world. You can imagine it. A woman sealed in a narrow, vertical shaft of earth, waiting in the dark for a master who would never come. The sheer psychological horror is beyond comprehension. The detail is so strange and cruel it feels like something from a nightmare, but it is a recorded part of your history. Your own end, by the white silk cord, is considered the most dignified. It is the method reserved for the higher-ranking concubines. It is a death befitting a consort, not a common slave. This distinction, this hierarchy in death, is the final, absurd expression of the palace's obsession with rank and ritual. The central academic question surrounding the story of the Chaotian Nu is the nature of their volition. The term itself, heaven-facing, and the official court narrative suggest a willing, even eager, sacrifice. Some scholars, trying to understand the mindset of the time, have proposed that for women whose entire existence was defined by the emperor, whose family's fortunes were tied to their own, and who had no other foreseeable future, this final act of devotion might have been seen as the only honorable path left. It was a way to ensure they were remembered not as forgotten, childless widows, but as paragons of loyalty. However, the overwhelming evidence and modern scholarly consensus lean heavily toward coercion. The story of the Yongle emperor's mass execution of his harem over a scandal is a stark example. After a rumor spread that a favorite concubine had an affair with a eunuch, the humiliated emperor allegedly had 2,800 women in his harem executed by the slow slicing method. While this specific event is recorded in an unofficial account by a surviving concubine, Lady Cuey, and is disputed by historians, it points to the absolute and brutal power the emperor wielded. Shortly after this alleged massacre, Lady Cuey herself, along with 15 other consorts, was voluntarily hanged on the day of the Yongle emperor's funeral. The proximity of these events makes any claim of choice seem like a cruel joke. The choice was not between life and death, but between a glorious death and a more horrific, dishonorable execution. Your consciousness fades. The white silk, the silent eunuchs, the faces of your companions. It all dissolves into a spreading darkness. You are now part of the emperor's eternal retinue. Your body will be placed in a small, separate tomb, one of the many satellites orbiting your master's grand subterranean palace. You will be an object in his collection, a testament to his power. You are a Chaotian Nu. You are facing the heavens, or perhaps just the endless silent dark. But what if the bell tolls, the emperor dies, and your world, instead of shrinking to the size of a noose, explodes into infinite possibility? What if, in the great lottery of the imperial harem, you have drawn the one and only grand prize ticket? This path is not yours, not this time. But let's imagine. Let's imagine you are not a mid-ranking concubine, but the one woman who matters most. You are the mother of the new emperor. The moment the late emperor's death is confirmed, you cease to be just a concubine, a pretty face he once favored. You are transformed. You become the Empress Dowager, the Huang Tai-hu. It is not just a title, it is a shield and a weapon. Your son, the new son of heaven, may be a child, barely able to comprehend the weight of the dragon robe that hangs on his small shoulders. He is the emperor, but you are the power. Your journey to this point has been a masterclass in survival. You navigated the treacherous waters of the harem, a world where favor was fleeting and rivals were everywhere. You endured the jealousy of the principal empress and the schemes of other women. You guarded your pregnancy, knowing that producing a son was your only path to security and power. And you succeeded. Your son lived, and he was chosen. Now, everything changes. The eunuchs who once looked past you now bow so low their foreheads nearly touch the ground. The ministers who once dismissed you as a mere woman now petition you for your favor. You move from your elegant but circumscribed palace into the grandest residence of the inner court, perhaps the palace of compassion and tranquility, Siningong. The traditional home of the Empress Dowager. You become the regent, advising your young son on all matters of state from behind the curtain. This, of course, is the story of some of the most powerful women in Chinese history. The most famous example from a later dynasty is Cixi. She entered the Forbidden City as a low-ranking concubine of the Xianfeng Emperor. When she gave birth to his only surviving son in 1856, her fate was sealed. Upon the emperor's death, her 5-year-old son ascended the throne. Cixi, through a brilliant and ruthless political coup, outmaneuvered the regents appointed by her late husband and became co-regent and the de facto ruler of China. She would control the Qing dynasty for nearly half a century, a titan who held the fate of an empire in her hands. Your life as Empress Dowager is a mixture of immense responsibility and immense luxury. You are the center of all court ritual. You oversee the management of the vast imperial household department, the education of the other princes and princesses, and the selection of their marriage partners. You have your own staff, your own treasury. While the emperor is allotted 21 pounds of premium meat per day, your own rations are nearly as lavish, a stark contrast to the mere 5 pounds allotted to a low-ranking attendant. But with this power comes a unique and somewhat obscure challenge. You must now manage the very system you just escaped. You are in charge of your late husband's remaining women. You must decide the fates of your former rivals and friends. Will you be merciful and allow them a comfortable retirement? Or will you be vengeful, using your newfound power to settle old scores? The cold palace is now yours to populate. It is a rarely discussed aspect of the Empress Dowager's role. She becomes the new master of the harem, a position fraught with complex personal and political dynamics. This leads to the great academic debate surrounding figures like Cixi. Were they brilliant rulers who skillfully navigated a patriarchal system? Or were they ruthless despots whose ambition ultimately harmed the nation? For decades, the conventional view, often colored by the biases of male Confucian historians and later revolutionaries, painted Cixi as a stubborn conservative who clung to power and led China to ruin. However, more recent revisionist scholarship has offered a more nuanced perspective. Historians like Yung Chang argue that Cixi was a modernizer who brought a medieval empire into the modern age, introducing railways, electricity, and modern weaponry, and even taking steps to abolish foot binding and prepare for parliamentary elections. They argue she was made a scapegoat for deep-seated problems beyond her control. A capable stateswoman who did what was necessary to hold a crumbling dynasty together. As you sit behind the silk screen, listening to the reports of your ministers, you are the living embodiment of this debate. You are a woman who has achieved the impossible. You have gone from being a piece in the game to the player who moves the pieces. You are no longer just a mother. You are the mother of the nation. You have survived, and in surviving, you have conquered. Perhaps you didn't draw the single grand prize ticket, but you drew a very, very good one. Your son is not the new emperor. The throne passed to the son of the principal empress, or perhaps to the child of a more senior consort. But your son is a prince, a kinwang, and you are his mother. This is your new identity. You are no longer just concubine so-and-so. You are now granted a new honorable title, Tai Fei, or Consort Dowager. It is a title of respect and security. You will not be sacrificed. You will not be sent to a nunnery or the cold palace. You have a future. In the days following the emperor's funeral, a quiet but significant ceremony is held. You are officially invested as a Tai Fei. You shed the colorful robes of a palace consort for the more somber, elegant attire of a dowager. And then you prepare to do something you haven't done since you were a girl. You prepare to leave the Forbidden City. For many concubines who bore sons, a well-documented historical outcome was to be allowed to leave the palace and live with their sons in their designated fiefdoms. Once a prince came of age, he was granted a title and a domain, usually in a provincial capital far from Beijing. This was a strategic move by the central court, designed to prevent the princes from accumulating too much power in the heart of the empire and plotting against their reigning brother. For the prince, it could feel like a form of exile. But for you, his mother, it is a release. You say your goodbyes to the few friends you have left in the harem. You pack your belongings, the silks, the jewels, the scrolls of poetry you have accumulated over the years. And you board a carriage. Not the simple sedan chair of a concubine, but the large, comfortable, ornate carriage of a Tai Fei. As you pass through the massive gates of the Forbidden City, the same gates you entered in terror as a teenager and never expected to see again from the outside, a strange feeling washes over you. It is not exactly joy, but a profound, dizzying sense of relief. Your new life is in a place like Taiyuan or Xi'an, cities with their own rich histories. Your son's princely establishment is a miniature replica of the Forbidden City, with its own courtyards, halls, and servants. But the atmosphere is entirely different. The air is cleaner. The rules are looser. The suffocating political tension of the capital is gone. Here, your son is the highest authority, and you are the most respected person in his household. And here, you discover a little-known facet of imperial life. The existence of these satellite princely courts scattered across the empire. While we focus on the grandeur of Beijing, these provincial establishments were important centers of power and culture in their own right. They were home to large retinues of imperial relatives, servants, and local officials, all revolving around the prince. Archaeological discoveries of Ming princely tombs, like that of the Prince of Jin Duan in Shaanxi, have revealed the wealth and complex customs of these regional courts, with their own silk robes, jade artifacts, and burial rituals. You are not retiring to a simple country villa. You are moving to the center of a different, smaller, but still very privileged world. Your days are now quiet. You are free from the constant competition and fear of the harem. You spend your time advising your son, managing the inner affairs of his household, practicing calligraphy, or walking in gardens that feel more spacious and natural than any in Beijing. For the first time in decades, you can feel the sun on your face without worrying about who is watching you. Yet your position is not without its complexities, which leads to an interesting but subtle academic discussion. What was the true social and political status of a Tai Fei in a princely establishment? On the one hand, she was the prince's mother, the object of supreme filial piety, the matriarch of the family. Her authority within the inner household was absolute. On the other hand, she was still a woman in a deeply patriarchal society, and her son was a potential political threat to the reigning emperor. Her actions and her son's were likely monitored by eunuchs and officials loyal to the capital. Was she truly free? Or had she just moved to a larger, more comfortable cage? Scholars who study court records and genealogies suggest that while a Tai Fei enjoyed great personal comfort and respect, her political agency was limited. She was a symbol of her son's legitimacy, but she also had to ensure he never showed any ambition that could be construed as a threat to the throne. You live out your days in this quiet, provincial dignity. You watch your son govern his domain. You may even live to see your grandchildren. You have traded the center of the empire for a life of peace and obscurity. You did not win the ultimate prize, but you survived. And in the world you came from, survival was a victory in itself. Not every woman who escaped the sacrificial altar was granted a life of honor. Some were condemned to a fate that many considered worse than a quick death. They were sent to the cold palace, Langong. The summons for this fate is different. It is not a formal proclamation in a grand hall. It is a quiet, chilling order delivered by a low-ranking eunuch. Your belongings are not packed. You are simply escorted away, stripped of your fine silks and jade hairpins, and dressed in the coarse, drab clothing of the lowest servants. You are taken to a remote, forgotten corner of the Forbidden City. The first thing you must understand about the Cold Palace is this. It is not a specific place. There is no building in the Forbidden City with a sign that reads, Cold Palace. This is a key, often misunderstood, historical point. The Cold Palace was a condition, a state of being. It was any residence, a palace, a courtyard, even a single sealed-off room, used to confine out-of-favor consorts. The modern Chinese idiom, daru leng gong, which means to be sidelined or ignored, comes from this. Your cold palace could be the very same ornate room you lived in yesterday, now stripped of all comforts and locked from the outside. More often, it was a place like the Palace of Great Brilliance, Jingyanggong. Located in the northeastern corner of the inner court, its remote location made it a convenient place to house those the emperor wished to forget. Once you were inside, the heavy gates were closed. You would likely never leave again. Your life becomes a monotonous, grinding misery. You are given minimal resources, a small portion of plain food, a brazier of coals in winter that barely warms the vast drafty room. You must cook for yourself, clean for yourself, and survive in near total isolation. The vibrant, bustling world of the court might as well be 1,000 miles away. You are a prisoner, forgotten by the world. It is said that some women went mad in the silence, talking to shadows, dressing each day in the tattered remnants of their former finery in anticipation of a summons that would never come. The most famous resident of this living tomb provides a poignant and historically lesser-known case. Consort Gong of the Ming Dynasty's Wanli Emperor. Her story is a tragedy of status and shame. She began as a humble palace maid, a woman named Wang. The young Wanli Emperor had an encounter with her, but was deeply embarrassed by her low status. When she became pregnant, he initially refused to acknowledge it. It was only when his own mother, the powerful Empress Dowager Li, confronted him with the records of his visits that he was forced to admit paternity. Lady Wang gave birth to a son, Zhu Chang Luo, the emperor's firstborn. This should have secured her position. Instead, it sealed her fate. The emperor doted on another consort, Lady Jung, and saw consort Gong and her son as a source of constant humiliation. He granted her the title Consort Gong, but then confined her to the palace of great brilliance for nearly 30 years. Despite being the mother of the crown prince, she was utterly neglected. Her son, Zhu Changluo, fought for 15 years against the political machinations of Lady Jung's faction to be officially named heir apparent. The accounts of Consort Gong's life are heartbreaking. It is said she spent her days weeping in her lonely palace, eventually crying herself blind. In 1611, when she was gravely ill, her adult son, now the crown prince, rushed to visit her, only to find the gates to her palace locked and the courtyard overgrown with weeds. He had to order eunuchs to break the lock to see his dying mother. She died in squalor and obscurity, a prisoner in the palace of the man she had served. This leads to an interesting academic debate. Was the cold palace a formal, legal punishment, or an informal but equally effective form of social and political erasure? Some legal scholars of the imperial era note that the law codes outlined punishments for imperial women, but a specific codified sentence of confinement to the cold palace is rare. Most historians argue it was a more insidious tool. It was not a sentence handed down by a court. It was a quiet, administrative decision. A consort was simply forgotten. Her name was struck from the list for the emperor's visits. Her allowances were cut. Her servants were reassigned. She was rendered a non-person, effectively erased from the records and memory of the court. This soft power was, in many ways, more terrifying than a formal execution, as it condemned a woman to a slow, living death, stripped of all hope and recognition. You sit on the cold stone floor of your new home. You look at your hands, no longer soft and delicate, but chapped and rough from labor. You are a ghost in your own home, haunting the fringes of a world that has already moved on without you. All you have left is time, endless, empty, silent time. There is another path of exile, one cloaked in piety. You are not condemned to the cold palace, nor are you chosen for the honor of sacrifice. Instead, the imperial edict declares that you and dozens of other childless concubines will be granted a life of serenity and religious devotion. You are to be sent to a royal monastery or nunnery. The process is swift and irreversible. Your head is shaved. Your beautiful silk robes are exchanged for the simple, coarse habits of a nun. You are stripped of your given name and assigned a new Dharma name, perhaps purity or contemplation. It is a name designed to erase your past. You are placed in a plain, curtained cart and driven out of the forbidden city, destined not for a prince's estate, but for a walled compound in the outskirts of Beijing. Sending the childless concubines of a deceased emperor to live out their days in Buddhist or Taoist nunneries was a common and well-documented practice, particularly in dynasties like the Tang. It served a dual purpose. It was seen as an act of mercy, sparing the women's lives, while allowing them to accumulate spiritual merit for the late emperor and the dynasty. It was also a practical solution, removing a large number of surplus women from the palace, thereby easing the financial burden and potential for political intrigue in the harem. Your new life is one of stark, ascetic routine. You rise before dawn for morning prayers. Your days are filled with chanting, meditation, copying sutras, and performing simple manual labor, tending the vegetable garden, sweeping the temple halls. The luxury of the palace is a distant, dreamlike memory. The food is simple vegetarian fare. The silence is broken only by the sound of bells and chanting. For some, it is a profound peace. For others, a profound boredom. You are safe, you are fed. But your individuality, your ambitions, your identity as the woman you once were, have been systematically dismantled. And yet, within this quiet, cloistered world lies the most extraordinary exception in Chinese history. A piece of trivia that sounds like fiction. The case of Wu Zetian. Her career began as a concubine to Emperor Taizong of the Tang dynasty at the age of 14. She was intelligent and beautiful. But when Taizong died in 649, she, along with all his other childless concubines, had her head shaved and was sent to the Ganye temple to begin her life as a nun. For any other woman, the story would have ended there. But Wu Zetian was no ordinary woman. While in the palace, she had already begun a secret affair with the crown prince, Li Ji. When Li Ji ascended the throne as Emperor Gaozong, he could not forget her. He began visiting her at the nunnery, and soon, with the misguided permission of his own childless wife, Empress Wang, who hoped Wu would distract the emperor from another rival. He brought Wu Zetian back to the palace. It was a shocking, almost unprecedented breach of protocol. A woman who had served one emperor was never to be touched by another, especially not his son. From this incredible return, Wu Zetian began one of the most ruthless and brilliant political ascents in history. She outmaneuvered all her rivals, became empress, and eventually, after Gaozong's death, deposed her own sons and declared herself emperor of a new dynasty, the Zhou. She remains the only woman in Chinese history to have ever officially ruled the country in her own right. And her story began and ended with that nunnery, a place of confinement that, for her, became a springboard to absolute power. This incredible story highlights a subtle academic debate. Were these royal nunneries purely places of religious sequestration? Or did they sometimes function as a kind of political holding pen? While 99.9% of the women sent there lived and died in obscurity, Wu Zetian's case shows that for a woman with powerful connections on the outside, a nunnery was not necessarily a complete erasure. Scholars suggest that for the Tang imperial house, with its more fluid, barbarian, cultural influences from the steppes, the rules of sequestration may not have been as rigid as in later, more orthodox Confucian dynasties like the Ming. For a new emperor, placing a controversial figure in a nunnery could be a temporary political solution, a way to remove her from the immediate court while keeping his options open. For most, it was a life sentence. For Wu Zetian, it was just a strategic retreat. You, however, are not Wu Zetian. You look at the serene, impassive golden Buddhas in the main hall. You have been told this is a place of peace, a release from worldly desires. But as you listen to the endless chanting, you can't help but feel that this, too, is just another kind of gilded cage. Only its bars are made not of lacquered wood, but of prayer. Your name was not on the list for sacrifice, nor for the nunnery. You do not have a powerful son to fall back on. You have not offended anyone enough to be sent to the cold palace. For you, and for many women like you, there is another, stranger fate. You will become a guardian of the dead. You are assigned to the emperor's mausoleum. This is not a simple grave, but a vast, sprawling complex, a city for the dead modeled on the Forbidden City itself. In the Ming Dynasty, the emperors were buried in a massive, 40 square kilometer valley north of Beijing, a place of immense spiritual and political significance. Each emperor had his own tomb, complete with a spirit road lined with stone animals and officials, courtyards, sacrificial halls, and barracks for the living guards. Deep within a massive earthen mound was the underground palace, a series of vaulted stone chambers where the emperor and his empress rested. Your new home is a small, plain house in a walled compound on the edge of this sacred precinct. You become part of a community of other low-ranking, childless concubines and court servants, all tasked with the same duty: to guard the tomb, Shuling, for the emperor. It is a life of perpetual mourning, a way to continue your service even after his death. Your daily life is one of quiet, monotonous ritual. You are responsible for maintaining the sacrificial halls, for burning incense, and for offering symbolic food and wine to the spirit of the late emperor. You live in relative comfort. You are fed, clothed, and housed. But it is a life of extreme isolation. You are cut off from the outside world, a community of women living in the shadow of an earthen mound, forever tied to a man who is now just a skeleton in a lacquered coffin. And here, you encounter a fascinating and little-known archaeological detail about these tombs. The underground palaces were designed as eternal homes. The famous Dingling, the tomb of the Wanli Emperor, the husband of your nemesis, consort Gong, was excavated in the 1950s. Inside, archaeologists found not only the coffins, but stone thrones for the emperor and his two empresses, giant porcelain jars filled with solid wax and wicks, the so-called everlasting lamps that may have burned for a short time after the tomb was sealed, and thousands of objects for daily life in the hereafter, from silk robes to chests of clothes. Some tombs even contained wooden furniture, altars, tables, and chairs, as if a meal had just been shared before the occupants were sealed away forever. These tombs were not just graves. They were fully furnished, self-contained worlds. Your job is to be the living link between that dead world and the real one. The life of a tomb guardian is lonely, but it is a shared loneliness. You and the other women form a strange, closed community. You are bound by the same past, the same fate. You share memories of the palace, of the man you all served in different ways. You grow old together, your world defined by the changing of the seasons and the unchanging rituals of ancestor worship. This strange existence raises an interesting academic question. What exactly was the social and legal status of these tomb-guarding women? Were they considered religious figures, akin to nuns in a state-sponsored cult of the deceased emperor? Or were they simply state pensioners, engaged in a lifetime of menial, ritualistic labor? There is no clear consensus. Their lives fell into a gray area of imperial society. They were no longer part of the harem, but they were not free citizens. They were not technically religious clergy, but their lives were dedicated to ritual. Historians who study the social structure of the imperial household suggest that these women occupied a unique, liminal space. They were, in essence, professional mourners. Their existence a permanent, living memorial to the emperor's reign. Their lives were a testament to the Confucian ideal of unwavering loyalty, a duty that did not stop even at the grave. You stand at the entrance to the Spirit Road, looking at the giant stone camels, elephants, and mythical beasts that guard the path to the tomb mound. They are silent, majestic, and like you, a permanent fixture in this landscape of death. They will stand here for centuries, long after your own bones have turned to dust and been forgotten. You are a guardian of the dragon's sleep, until you too are laid to rest in this lonely, sacred ground. There is a fate so taboo, so contrary to the deeply held beliefs of your culture, that it is spoken of only in whispers. It is the fate where you are not sacrificed, not exiled, and not forgotten. Instead, you are inherited. This is not supposed to happen. According to the strict Confucian ethics that govern your world, your late husband's women, especially his concubines, are to be treated as mothers, or at least respected elders, by his sons. The Chinese term for a father's concubine, shumu, literally means secondary mother. Any sexual relationship between a son and his father's concubine is considered qin shu ji qing, the behavior of animals. It is incest, a gross violation of filial piety and the natural order. And yet, it happened. The practice, known as levirate marriage, was not a Han Chinese tradition, but it was a common custom among the nomadic peoples of the northern steppes, like the Xiongnu and the Jurchens, who would become the Manchus. For them, it was a practical matter. Women were a valuable part of the family property, and when the head of the household died, it was logical for his heir, a son or a brother, to take his wives and concubines into his own household, to care for them and preserve the family's wealth and bloodline. A key historical point is that this cultural clash over the inheritance of women became a recurring theme whenever China was ruled or influenced by barbarian dynasties from the north. In the Tang dynasty, which had strong cultural ties to the steppe peoples, the practice occasionally surfaced at the highest levels, causing great scandal. The most famous case involved the great emperor Taizong, the father of Wu Zetian's second husband. But a more direct example is Emperor Xuanzong, who fell madly in love with the wife of his own son, the beautiful Yang Guifei. He managed to have her removed from his son's household, made a Taoist priestess for a short time to purify her status, and then brought her into his own harem as his most beloved consort. While this was the reverse, a father taking a son's wife, it demonstrates the same shocking disregard for Confucian norms. So, imagine the scenario. The new emperor, the son of your late husband, ascends the throne. He remembers you from the palace. Perhaps he saw you as a boy and was captivated by your beauty or kindness. Now, he is the Son of Heaven, and his will is law. He issues a quiet decree. You are not sent away. You are moved to a new, even more luxurious residence. And the visitor who comes to you is not a eunuch with an order of exile, but the new emperor himself. It is a terrifying and precarious position. You have the ultimate favor of the most powerful man in the empire. But you are also the living symbol of his moral failing. The Empress Dowager, his own mother, likely despises you. The court officials, the stern Confucian scholars, whisper behind their hands about your corrupting influence. They will blame this transgression on you, not him. It is a well-known historical trope that the downfall of a dynasty is often blamed not on a weak or corrupt emperor, but on the seductions of a woman, a wife or concubine who supposedly monopolized his attention and made him neglect the affairs of state. You are now the prime candidate for that role in the history books. Your life is a gilded terror. You have every material comfort, but you are socially and politically radioactive. Your family, if they are still alive, may benefit from your position, but they also live in fear of the inevitable backlash. This leads to a complex academic debate. To what extent did these barbarian customs truly influence mainstream Han Chinese imperial culture? Some historians argue that the influence was minimal, that these cases of inheriting a father's concubine were rare, scandalous exceptions that proved the Confucian rule. They point out that the emperors who engaged in such behavior were almost universally condemned for it by historians in the official dynastic records. Other scholars, however, suggest a more nuanced view. They argue that during periods of intense cultural mixing, like the northern and southern dynasties or the Tang, these customs, while never fully accepted, did create a more fluid and sometimes contradictory set of social norms among the elite. The very existence of these events, however rare, shows that the emperor's personal desires could, and sometimes did, override the most deeply entrenched moral codes. A famous exception to all of this was the Hongji emperor of the Ming dynasty. He is known as the only truly monogamous emperor in Chinese history. He had only one wife, Empress Zhang, and never took a single concubine. Historians believe the reason was that his own mother, a palace maid, had been murdered by his father's jealous favorite consort. Having witnessed the deadly politics of the harem firsthand, he swore off the practice entirely. His reign stands as a stark testament to the misery that the system of polygamy and concubinage could create, and a powerful counterpoint to the taboo and dangerous life you are now forced to lead. You have the emperor's love, but it is a love that could get you and everyone around you killed. Your fate is not decided by death or prayer or the whims of a new master within the Forbidden City. Instead, your destination lies far beyond the borders of the Middle Kingdom. One day, an edict arrives. A delegation from a vassal state, perhaps the Korean kingdom, the Vietnamese court, or a distant Mongol Khanate, has come to pay tribute to the new emperor. As a sign of his magnanimity and to strengthen diplomatic ties, you are to be given as a gift. You are to be married to a foreign ruler. This was another, less common, but documented path for a concubine after an emperor's death. The use of women as diplomatic tools was a fact of life in imperial China. The famous story of Wang Zhaojun from the Han dynasty, a palace lady sent to marry a Xiongnu chieftain in exchange for peace on the northern frontier, is the classic example. While she was not the concubine of a deceased emperor, the principle was the same. A woman's life in exchange for political stability. In your case, as a woman from the previous emperor's harem, you are a particularly prestigious gift, a symbol of dynastic continuity and generosity. The preparations are elaborate. You are not cast out in shame, but celebrated as a princess. You are given a lavish dowry of silks, gold, and precious objects. Weary court translators instruct you in the basic language and customs of your new home. But it is not a joyous occasion. You are being packaged for export. As one historical text pointedly notes, it could be argued that one prison had merely been replaced by another. The journey is long and arduous. You travel for weeks or months in a swaying carriage, leaving the familiar landscapes of your homeland behind. You cross mountains and enter a world that looks, sounds, and smells completely different from everything you have ever known. The food is strange. The music is alien. The clothes are coarse. You are an exotic creature, a curiosity. When you arrive at the foreign court, you are met with a mixture of awe and suspicion. You are the woman from the center of the world, from the sophisticated court of the Son of Heaven. But you are also a potential spy, a symbol of a powerful neighbor whose intentions are not always clear. Your new husband, the king or Khan, may treat you with respect due to your origins, or he may see you as little more than a trophy. And here, you encounter a rare and fascinating historical tidbit: the existence of foreign concubines in the households of Chinese rulers as well. While it was more common for Chinese women to be sent out, sometimes women came the other way. The most striking example comes not from an emperor, but from the famous Ming loyalist Koxinga, who fought the Qing from his base in Taiwan. His household included 2 European concubines, one of Italian and Dutch descent named Cecilia Odenberg, and another Dutch woman. These women, either captured or having somehow entered his sphere of influence, lived as his secondary consorts. It shows that, while rare, cross-cultural unions at the highest levels were not unheard of, creating complex, multicultural households. You are now the other side of that coin. Your life in this new land is one of profound alienation. You must navigate a whole new set of court politics in a language you barely understand. You are expected to bear children for your new husband, heirs who will carry the blood of both your old home and your new one. These children will be living symbols of a political alliance, their very existence a diplomatic statement. This leads to an interesting academic debate about the agency of these diplomatic brides. Were they merely passive pawns in a political game played by men? Their personal feelings and happiness completely irrelevant? Or did some of them manage to carve out positions of influence and power in their new homes? The traditional view emphasizes their victimhood. However, some historians argue that these women were often highly intelligent and politically astute. They could act as cultural ambassadors, introducing new ideas and technologies from China to their new courts. They could become trusted advisors to their husbands, using their unique position to mediate between the two countries. And in some cases, as the mothers of future kings, they could wield considerable influence as Empress Dowagers in their adopted homelands, shaping the political destiny of a country that was once foreign to them. You stand under the open sky of your new home, a sky that seems wider, the wind harsher than any you have known. You are 1,000 miles from the vermilion walls of the Forbidden City. You have escaped the fate of your sisters, but you are more alone than ever. You are a gift, a symbol, a stranger in a strange land. Your life, a testament to the long and powerful reach of the empire you left behind. There is one last door, the narrowest and most difficult to pass through. It is the door to freedom. This is the rarest of all fates. For most women who entered the Forbidden City, it was a life sentence. The palace gates were a one-way street. The logic was simple and brutal. A woman who had known the intimacy of the Son of Heaven could never belong to another man. To allow her to return to the world and potentially remarry would be a stain on the emperor's sacred dignity, an act of treason. And yet, there were exceptions. The edict comes down, not for sacrifice, not for exile, not for a diplomatic marriage. It declares that you, for your meritorious service to the late emperor over many years, are to be released. You will be granted a pension sufficient to live on and allowed to return to your family. The news is so shocking, so contrary to everything you have been taught, that you cannot at first process it. freedom. It is a word you have not allowed yourself to think for a decade or more. The practice, while rare, was not unheard of. Historical documents record that some emperors, either out of personal compassion or as a matter of policy, did occasionally release palace women. The Hongwu Emperor of the Ming, the same man who revived human sacrifice, ironically also stipulated a minimum service period of 5 years, after which a concubine could theoretically retire. Some more compassionate emperors were said to have sent home women they had never visited, with financial compensation to start a new life. You shed your palace silks one last time. But this time you exchanged them not for a nun's habit or a burial shroud, but for the simple, sturdy clothes of a commoner. You are given a purse of silver, your pension, and you are escorted to the gate of divine might, the northern gate of the forbidden city, the one used by servants and staff. You step through it, and for the first time since you were a girl, you are outside. The world is an explosion of the senses. The noise, the smell, the teeming crowds of the Beijing streets. It is all overwhelming. You have spent your adult life in a curated world of silence, of soft footsteps and whispered commands. The city is a chaotic, vibrant, terrifying place. You make the long journey back to your home village, a place you only dimly remember. When you arrive, you are a stranger. Your parents may be dead. Your siblings are married with families of their own. The world has moved on. You are a woman in your late 20s or early 30s. An advanced age in a time when most women married at 17. You have no skills for a normal life. You cannot cook for a family, manage a farm, or haggle in the market. You know how to arrange flowers, how to play the zither, how to please an emperor. Useless skills here. And here you encounter the most poignant and little-known challenge of the freed palace woman: the problem of social reintegration. You are a curiosity, a source of gossip. The villagers look at you with a mixture of awe and suspicion. You were the emperor's woman. What are you doing back here? Your pension makes you wealthy by local standards, but your past makes you an outcast. Can you marry? This is the most difficult question, and it leads to a complex academic debate about the social status and marriage prospects of former palace women. Legally, a retired concubine was free to pursue a normal life, including marriage and family. But the social reality was far more complicated. Many men would be intimidated by your past. To marry a woman who had belonged to the emperor was a daunting prospect. Would it bring honor or trouble to the family? You were not a virgin, a highly prized quality in a bride. You were also older than the average bride. Some historians argue that, for many released women, finding a respectable match was nearly impossible. They often lived out their lives unmarried, as permanent aunts with their relatives, or lived quiet, independent lives on their pensions. Others, too old or too institutionalized by palace life to adapt to the outside world, chose to voluntarily enter nunneries or take on menial jobs in places like the imperial laundry service. The most famous case of a concubine successfully leaving an emperor is the unique story of Wen Xiu, a consort of Puyi, the last emperor of China. After they were both expelled from the Forbidden City in 1924, she lived with him for a time in Tianjin. But in 1931, in a stunningly modern act, she sued him for divorce and won. It was an unprecedented act for a consort in nearly 3,000 years of imperial history. The deposed emperor immediately issued an edict demoting her to a commoner. But she was already free. She lived out the rest of her life as a primary school teacher and never remarried. Her story is the ultimate, modern expression of the freedom you are now struggling to navigate. You sit in the small courtyard of your family home. It is nothing like the grand courtyards of the palace, but the sky above is the same. You are free, but you are also adrift. You have left the gilded cage, only to find you have forgotten how to fly. Throughout this journey, on all the branching paths of your possible fates, there has been one constant, shadowy presence: the eunuch. It was he who announced the emperor's death, he who read the will, he who led you to the sacrificial feast, he who locked the door of the cold palace, and he who escorted you to the nunnery or the gate of freedom. To truly understand what happened to the emperor's concubines, you must understand the men who managed them. From your perspective as a concubine, they were part of the landscape, the ubiquitous staff who ran the palace. But their role was far more complex. A fundamental historical fact is that the eunuch bureaucracy was a unique and powerful institution in imperial China, a third pillar of power alongside the imperial family and the scholar officials. In theory, they were the emperor's most trusted servants. Because they could not have children, they would have no ambition to usurp power and start a dynasty of their own. This was the entire rationale for their existence. They were considered slavishly dependent on the emperor and therefore absolutely loyal. History, however, repeatedly proved this theory wrong. Living in the inner court, you saw their power firsthand. They were the ultimate intermediaries. No one saw the emperor without their permission. No document reached his desk without passing through their hands. No word came from him that was not spoken through their mouths. This control of access gave them immense power to curry favor, influence policy, and amass huge fortunes through bribes and kickbacks. When an emperor died, this power became critical. The eunuchs were the ones who knew the truth of the succession. They were often the closest confidants of the young princes, their tutors and caretakers from birth. An ambitious eunuch could mold a young heir's character to suit his own ambitions, or join forces with a scheming empress or concubine to eliminate rivals and install their own candidate on the throne. The fate of entire dynasties could rest on their intrigues. And here we find a fascinating and obscure fact about the eunuch power structure. They built their own parallel government within the palace. By the late Ming dynasty, this eunuch-led apparatus had grown to include 12 directorates, a secret service to spy on and imprison their enemies, and as many as 12,000 employees, making it comparable in size to the official state bureaucracy. They were not just influential individuals. They were a fully organized political machine operating entirely within the walls of the Forbidden City. The infamous Ming eunuch Wei Zhongxian, for example, became so powerful in the 1620s that he was effectively a dictator and nearly succeeded in having his own nephew named as heir to the throne. Your fate was a piece in their grand game. If you were allied with a powerful eunuch, he could protect you after the emperor's death. He could ensure your name was on the list for a comfortable retirement or the honored status of a Tai Fei. If you were the enemy of a powerful eunuch, he could just as easily ensure you were sent to the cold palace or volunteered for the final feast. They were the ones who, both literally and figuratively, held the keys to every door. They were the ones who would carry out the executions for sacrifice or assist a concubine in her suicide. Your life was in their hands. This leads to the central and enduring academic debate about the role of eunuchs in Chinese history. Were they a stabilizing or a destabilizing force? The traditional Confucian narrative, written by their bitter rivals, the scholar officials, almost universally paints them as corrupt, greedy, power-hungry villains who were one of the primary causes of dynastic decline. The officials hated them because they had unrestricted access to the emperor and could bypass the normal channels of government. Modern historians, however, offer a more balanced view. They argue that eunuchs were not inherently evil, but a product of the imperial system itself. They represented the personal, autocratic will of the emperor, while the scholar officials represented the political, bureaucratic will of the state. The conflict between them was a conflict between two different forms of power. There were many capable, loyal, and brilliant eunuchs in history, like the great admiral Zheng He, who led China's treasure fleets across the Indian Ocean, who served the state with distinction. The system itself, which gave immense power without checks and balances to a group of castrated, socially ostracized men, was the real problem. You watch an old eunuch walk by, his silk robes rustling. His face is a mask of calm. But behind his eyes, calculations are being made, alliances are being formed, and fates are being decided. You are just one of many pieces on his board. Whether you are promoted to a queen or swept aside as a pawn depends entirely on how he decides to play the game. The years, the decades, the dynasties blur. The world outside the Vermilion Walls is changing violently. Empires rise and fall, revolutions brew. But inside the walls, your world, or the world of the women who came after you, seems frozen in time. Until one day, it isn't. Let's fast forward. The year is 1924. The Qing, China's last imperial dynasty, has been gone for more than a decade. The country is a fledgling republic, torn apart by warlords. But due to a strange political agreement, the Articles of Favorable Treatment for the Qing imperial house, the last emperor, a young man named Puyi, has been allowed to continue living in the Forbidden City, retaining his title and his court as if he were still a ruler. You are one of the surviving concubines of his father, the Guangxu Emperor. You are an old woman now, a Tai Fei. You have lived your entire life by the arcane rules of the imperial harem. You are one of the last of your kind. Then, on a cold autumn day, soldiers under a warlord named Feng Yuxiang surround the Forbidden City. They tear up the agreement. They order everyone out. The 500-year imperial dream is over. You, along with the young emperor, his empress, his consort, and the few other surviving dowager consorts, are evicted from the only home you have ever known. This is the final, historical end for the imperial concubines of China. They did not fade away. Their existence came to an abrupt halt. They were forced to step out of a medieval world and into the 20th century. You walk through the gate of divine might for the last time. The city of Beijing is a terrifying sight. There are automobiles honking, men and women in strange Western clothes, political posters on the walls. The world you were trained to understand, a world of ritual, hierarchy, and imperial majesty, is gone. In its place is something loud, chaotic, and utterly alien. You and the other women are relics, living ghosts of a dead empire. Where do you go? What do you do? The new Republican government has no protocol for dealing with surplus imperial consorts. Some of you may have families to go to, but they are strangers living in a world you do not comprehend. Others, with no family left, are completely adrift. And here we see a truly unique and obscure social phenomenon: the struggle of the last imperial women to integrate into modern society. Puyi wrote in his autobiography that he had to report daily to 5 mothers, the dowager consorts of his father and adoptive father. He hated the chore, but it shows that they maintained their status until the very end. After the expulsion, their fates scattered, largely unrecorded. They were women trained for a highly specialized purpose that no longer existed. Their situation highlights the immense social chasm between the imperial world and the new China. This abrupt end also provides a final, dramatic answer to the long-running academic debate on the nature of women's lives under the imperial system. Was it a system of pure oppression? Or did it offer a unique, if limited, path to power and influence for women? For centuries, the primary path to social mobility for elite women in China was through marriage and the harem system. A girl from a humble background, with luck and a son, could become the most powerful woman in the empire. The end of the imperial system closed this strange, dangerous, but effective avenue of female power. The new republic offered new freedoms for women: the right to education, to work, to choose their own partners. But the old path, the path of the concubine, was gone forever. You find a small room in a quiet part of the city. You live on the meager pension you were granted. People on the street sometimes stare at you. They can see it in your posture, in the way you carry yourself. The unmistakable bearing of a woman raised in the Forbidden City. You are a living artifact. You sometimes hear news of the others. You hear that Wen Xiu, Puyi's young consort, did the unthinkable and divorced him, becoming a schoolteacher. You cannot even comprehend such an act. It is a choice from a different universe. You sit by your window and watch the world hurry by. You are the last echo of a silent, gilded world. You are the final answer to the question of what really happened to the emperor's concubines. What happened was that, in the end, they just faded away, their stories dissolving into the noise of a new century, their soft footsteps finally lost in the roar of history. Wind down conclusion. The story is over now. The last concubine has walked out of the Forbidden City, and the gates have closed behind her, this time for good. The echo of her footsteps fades into the noise of the modern world, and the world of the palace recedes, becoming an old dream. Feel the tension release from your shoulders, the weight of the silk, the coldness of the jade, the heavy perfumed air of the inner court. Let it all drift away. The vermilion walls dissolve into the soft darkness of your room. The intricate lattice of the windows becomes the familiar shadows on your ceiling. The whispers of the eunuchs and the rustle of the maids are replaced by the gentle sound of the wind outside, or the soft hum of the fan you turned on earlier. You are no longer a piece in an imperial game. You are floating now, untethered, in that quiet, peaceful space between wakefulness and sleep. The journey is done. The history has been told. All that is left is rest. Let the stream of drowsiness carry you away from the grand halls and lonely courtyards, and into the quiet, safe, and peaceful landscape of your own dreams. There are no more bells to be tolled, no more edicts to be read. There is only this moment, this silence, this deep and gentle peace. The story is over. Good night.